the newsagents.
There may be some people here today who say, where's the surprise? Where's the rabbit out of the hat? To which I say, if you want politics as pantomime, I hear Clapton is nice this time of year.
That was Keir Starmer this morning in Manchester, totally unapologetic that there were no surprises in the manifesto. The Labour message has been crafted. It is moving steadily, if not excitingly, towards the general election on July the 4th. And everything is a restatement of what they've said before.
So no rabbits and a real desire for change. But what about the things that really need to change in this country and change fast? Why does child poverty only get 2 mentions in the whole manifesto? Welcome to the Newsagents.
It's John.
It's Emily.
And a little bit later on, we're going to be talking to Peter Kyle, senior member of the Shadow Cabinet, and one of the people who is very close to Keir Starmer and will play a central role in a Labour government if they win the general election. That's of no doubt. And we are going to talk to him mainly about that whole issue of child poverty that you mentioned in the introduction there.
Yeah, and try and seek answers as to what Labour is choosing to do and, frankly, choosing not to do in this manifesto launched today. But let's start with Keir Starmer and the speech that he made. And I think for anyone who's been following the campaign quite closely, playing the bingo card, there were quite a lot of familiar stories there. I mean, I feel like I've heard about Dad's a Toolmaker, the Alder Hey Hospital, which is doing amazing work with heart surgery, but also the rotten teeth thing. This is a theme he keeps going back to. How many children are being admitted to hospital because they can't get dental work? And actually, over the course of the last 2 weeks, I'd say, he has honed those stories, the personal stories, the person with the mortgage, the person who's lost their house, the person who couldn't have the extra child because of Liz Truss's crashing of the economy. These are all brilliantly told narratives to illustrate why Labour is just going on this one-word campaign, which is change. And for anyone waiting to hear anything new today, no, it really didn't come.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, and what they're framing as being change is not kind of what you and I think of as change normally. You know, change means new policies, radical new ideas, or whatever it happens to be. They are saying change is stability. And they're saying that is radical. Change is radical. Change
is not changing the whole time.
Exactly. And so that's the kind of way they're trying to frame the argument. I thought when we got together last night to record after the Sky debate, I felt Keir Starmer was a lot of the time on the back foot, answering why he, Corbyn and all the rest of it. I thought today it was much more a front foot performance. He was more attacking. He was more confident. He was more sure of himself. He was much punchier in the question and answers, even though the answers may not have been quite what you'd have expected as detailed answers to the questions that he was asked.
Let's hear some of the speech right now.
A rebuilding that must begin, first and foremost, with new choices on economic growth. That is the mandate we seek from Britain at this election, a mandate for economic growth. Because the way we create wealth in this country is broken. It leaves far too many people feeling insecure. People who are working hard and doing the right thing. So we will reform it. And we will keep on reforming it until it delivers for them. Wealth creation is our number one priority. Growth is our core business, the only route to improving the prosperity of our country and the living standards of working people.
I'm going to bet that Keir Starmer's vocabulary has actually shrunk quite significantly over the last 3 weeks, because the words that he keeps on coming back to are service, public service, working people and change. And if I take you back to when we interviewed Starmer in January of 23, you saw before us somebody who was trying much more visibly to think of the answers to the questions we were asking. Now, there is no gap between the question and the answer. He knows exactly what the line is. It's almost like a Shift F7, Shift F10. He's not allowing himself to go into a space of thinking or thought. He's basically got his lines honed. They could be on auto cue, and you know when you press this button, you're going to get that answer.
Okay, I have a mental picture of Keir at home with Vic, his wife, and Vic says, "Do you want some tomato ketchup with that?" And he says, "Well, I came into politics late. I started off, spent 5 years at the Crown Prosecution Service. I served in Northern Ireland. It was a choice because I wanted to serve my country that I will now have the tomato ketchup." And everything feels like he's said it a million times before. And he doesn't care. I think that's Labour's strategy. Say it again and again.
But
there will be some people who don't know you're the son of a toolmaker
do you know what
and
I
a
thought?
nurse.
He quietly lowered his voice when he said the son of a toolmaker. I think he was quite shocked at how the audience laughed at that line last night. And they laughed not because of the toolmaker, but because we've heard the line so much it's become slightly parodic. Today I noticed he dropped his voice when he said it, as if to say, oh God, I think this might be a bit much. Like, I'm really overdoing this. And if you're somebody who is used to quite, thoughtful debate, you must hate hearing the same lines over and over again. But as you say, it's strategy. There are people all over the country who are coming to every single speech he says for the first time, right? And many he won't ever reach at all, except possibly on sort of TikTok videos or social media pages. And so I think he cannot do this stuff enough. But for us, 3.5 weeks into the campaign, and to be fair to many of you, to the listeners who we keep playing these clips to, you'll be like, oh my God, okay, enough already, right?
But there is a central argument, though, which I think that is the positive side of this campaign. For all the shortcomings, for the lack of radicalness, for the lack of a big idea, for the lack of, there is a central argument, which is that the change that comes to Britain comes with economic growth. And therefore, the key policies that Labour are going to introduce are all about how you can generate economic growth so that our growth rate is not as sluggish as it has been, kind of where it's barely moving along, and that you will kind of reform planning laws and you will do all these things that will aid infrastructure building, and so that you can start generating the economic growth that we've seen in the past in the UK, that you've seen in continental Europe, but which is strangely absent at the moment.
One of the questions that I think really stays for Labour is, you've said there'll be no austerity. You've promised no return to Tory austerity, and we heard him do that again today. You've also said that you will stick within your fiscal rules. There will be no borrowing, right? And you're not going to tax people more. How do all those things add up to improving a state that is fundamentally broken? They will carry on saying growth. They will carry on saying growth. There is one thing, massive thing, that is inhibiting our growth, and it's our relationship right now with the EU. And if you're looking for any mention of Brexit, then actually there was very little solace in today's manifesto. There is one line on page 121 which says Labour's Britain will stay outside the EU but make Brexit work. There are heaps of areas. I mean, I think one that they talk about is sort of veterinary deals. There are heaps of small areas, small trading areas where they could massively unlock growth. I think Channel 4's economics correspondent yesterday had one where she's talking about industry. Our industrial output has gone absolutely down the spout. And this is an area that we probably need to hear Labour saying, right, we're going to start using the EU, we're going to start rebuilding that relationship to make sure that we are exporting and importing the right things that push our growth up in their areas. We're not hearing any loud mention of that at the moment. And actually, until they start telling us where this growth is coming from, I think we are going to be asking questions about whether it will come.
Look, I think we asked the same questions about the Labour manifesto today as we did about the Conservative manifesto at Silverstone on Tuesday, where they were talking about £17 billion worth of tax cuts. they were talking about an extra £6 billion in spending on defence to get defence spending up to 2.5% of GDP. And they were saying, well, we're going to cut welfare payments and we're going to cut the amount of money that we spend on consultancies and we're going to cut waste and we're going to improve the tax take of people who aren't paying their tax. And you think, yeah, up to a point, but is that really going to get you to that number of 23 billion? And you feel the same today about Labour, where they say, it's all going to happen with economic growth. Yeah. And we are going to kind of light the economy up and suddenly we'll have growth rates of 2% or 3% that will be stable and non-inflationary and all the rest of it. Yeah, but what if you don't? And that is the question that Labour won't answer. And they're saying, well, we're putting in everything, all the building blocks to encourage that growth rate. But growth in the UK has proved incredibly elusive when compared to our European partners. Now, OK, Europe's not doing great at the moment, but that is a real problem that Britain has had over a sustained period.
Yeah, and I think the other problem is we are not being told how much growth would unlock enough spending for them to actually start improving public services. So the electorate, in a way, is being asked to dive in, right? And on the one hand, it's very easy. You say, well, if you think Britain's broken, vote for change. And it looks by the polls as if actually that's enough for a lot of people. Yes, we think Britain's broken. We are going with change. But what we're not really hearing is how much growth, how much money do we need to start making as a country before we can start seeing a difference in public services? And those numbers are completely elusive.
We know there are a whole pile of priorities, from education, from housing, from schools to whatever, to child poverty. What's the number one priority? What would they do first of all if they got this economic growth? And I don't feel, looking at that manifesto, I don't feel I've got the answer to that question. There are a whole pile of things that they'd love to do. But what is the core of where they think the problem is greatest? And I'm not sure the manifesto answers that.
Well, joining us now is Peter Kyle. And there was so much, Peter, in that speech from Keir Starmer about the future generation. And he thanked children for the sacrifice that they made. And yet in 25,000 words of your manifesto, child poverty is mentioned just twice. Why is that good enough?
We've got the manifesto, which is tackling the whole youth experience, and that includes child poverty, because you can't tackle child poverty until you get the fundamentals of running the economy right. But if you look at the experience of young people at school, we're going to make sure that kids don't go to school hungry anymore through a fully costed, fully funded scheme. We're going to make sure every school has a mental health hub. Every community has one as well. We're going to tackle the issues of social media and the way it impacts young people. And of course, we're going to enfranchise young people so they have more power. £1.5 million new homes is also going to mean that young people can get onto the housing ladder and have a future secure home to go to. So we're fixing the fundamentals. And you can guarantee that a Labour government, it's baked into what we do, that we will tackle poverty in all its forms.
Honestly,
we want to get the fundamentals right. Absolutely.
You're talking about enfranchising young people to have more power. And yet, these are the statistics staring you in the face right now. 46% of children in families with 3 or more kids are in poverty. Why isn't that screaming at your party to end the cap on child benefits? Why aren't you listening to Gordon Brown, who said we've got to rethink it? Poverty has gone up by 600,000 in the last few years.
We have 2.5 million adults who are not economically active, the highest number we've ever had in Britain. We've got to get the fundamentals right. That's why Liz Kendall is putting forward a package of reforms that will mean that we'll tackle the health issues that are underlying worklessness. And then, of course, we're going to tackle the waiting lists in the NHS to do so as well. And then you look at the fact that most people who are living in households with poverty have parents who are in work. So we're going to tackle that with the New Deal for working people. So we're going to make sure that work finally pays. You can't just say child poverty is an issue, look at it in singularity and say that there was one.
No, but you can do something specific about it right now.
Well, and we will. And that's why that the 6 steps forward based on the 5 missions and a decade of national renewal, all of this will tackle the fundamental problems that we have. And there is no greater expression of fundamental failure than we have of child poverty. And we have the programme of government that will fix the fundamentals so that we can tackle the specific ones like that.
And you say nothing more fundamental, and yet, as Emily says, it gets 2 mentions in 25,000 words. And it says Labour will develop an ambitious strategy. Not Labour has developed an ambitious strategy. It's something for some time in the future, it feels like.
Well, overwhelmingly, the biggest change in the last 15 years when it comes to child poverty is the number of children living in households which parent in work. Now, don't forget that in 1997, when Labour came in, worklessness and adults in households without work was the most powerful driver of child poverty. Of course, we lifted 800,000 children out of poverty in the last Labour government. The challenge we have now is that work is not paying for enough people. You can't tackle that fundamental challenge unless you get the fundamentals of running the economy right. New Deal for working people, for example, stabilising the economy, then investing and reforming in that economy, getting growth into the economy by a reform of regulation and the planning system. Getting these things right will deliver change for families, and we will make sure as a Labour government that those families who need the most investment and change will get it.
So why is Gordon Brown, who was the brains behind Sure Start when it was introduced in 1998, 99, why is he so concerned that you're not doing anything about lifting the cap on child benefit, which is one of the most direct things that you could do that would affect the numbers in child poverty?
Well, what Gordon Brown is saying is that if you want change in our country, you vote Labour.
He literally said we've got to rethink it, and you haven't.
Well, yes, but he also says, as a fundamental principle, if you want change for issues like child poverty, you vote Labour to deliver that change. And we will.
Come on, Peter, he would say that, wouldn't he? I mean, answer the question about the cap on child benefit.
As I say, we think that there are issues affecting young people and children who are living in poverty and households of poverty that are so fundamental and required and relate to the way that our economy is being managed and structured. We can't have the assumption that the next 14 years will continue as the previous 14 years. We have to do things differently, which is why we believe this is a change election and why our manifesto is a change manifesto for our country. And it will change those fundamentals by getting growth into the economy based on a stable economy, reform of regulation and planning and such like. And then we can get building again, building labs, building data centers, building houses, so that we can deliver the fundamental change that people need, including and specifically people living in poverty.
Yeah, you talk about a change party, but Rachel Reeves in March 2022, after the last budget that Sunak gave as Chancellor, talked about mum skipping meals, and she asked how many children and pensioners will drift into poverty because of the choices this government made. She forecast that 1 million more children will fall into poverty in 5 years' time. We are in the middle of that now. And just yesterday, your shadow chancellor said she had no plans to tier the interest paid on reserves that commercial banks hold at the Bank of England. This is technical stuff, I know, but that totals £700 billion. Why would you make that choice? Why is that a good priority for Labour?
Because we are inheriting, if we win, an economy that has been run by the Tories for 14 years. We are not inheriting the 2010 economy. We would be inheriting the 2024 economy, an economy that right now today has 0% growth in it and the highest taxation for 80 years.
So children have to starve until we're seeing growth. I mean, that's the choice.
4 times what it was when we left office in 2010, and people make jokes about letters that were then. Well, it's 4 times higher now. So we have to be honest with people, and we have taken the hard choices, and it is hard, really difficult in an election to say to people, we can't do everything that we want to do from the start.
But why isn't this a priority? Why isn't it a priority, Peter? If this is a hard choice, leaving children in poverty, I'd say, is a very hard choice for a future Labour government to be making.
What our entire country needs, including people who are living in poverty, is for the country to take those immediate steps that will make an immediate difference, and then the fundamental change that will deliver the long-term opportunities that people need, and tackle the challenges that are out there at the moment. We can't just throw money at individual issues and not fix the fundamentals. That is where we've got to with the Tories, because don't forget, every winter they shovel money into the NHS, and it all gets squandered in tackling the sticking plaster issues that they face at that moment in time. We are determined to fix the fundamentals, and we have been very restrained in this election, because we recognise that radical in these days is different through ordinary people's eyes. Radical is being able to get to see a doctor within a week if you're in pain. Radical is
Pe-
sending your kid to a school where the roof isn't crumbling.
Peter.
Radical is knowing that your economy will deliver more money into your pocket in the years ahead than it has done this year and then in the years gone by.
Come on,
so we
Peter,
have a manifesto that will tackle those changes that people that need in their daily lived experiences.
I am thinking of the old Harold Wilson maxim, which you will know well, that the Labour Party is a moral crusade or it is nothing. And what you've just said to us is that Labour is a restrained crusade.
No, I'm not saying that at all. Today it is radical to have stability in our economy. It is radical to have a school where it's not crumbling. It is radical to think that the economy will deliver more money into your pocket in the years ahead than you've had this year and in the last few years. You have to understand what radical means to most people right now. We are being honest about what the state of the economy that we would be inheriting if we win, the state of public services, the state of our reputation around the world. Keir has taken the bold, difficult decision to stand there and talk about a decade of national renewal. We are being honest that some of the challenges that we will be inheriting will take a decade.
Of course,
but we have the 5 missions 18 months ago. We've got the 6 steps from last month. We've got the manifesto today. All of it is pointing in exactly the same direction, not the kind of zigzagging, the up and down, the ins and outs, and the infighting that we've had from the Tories that's holding us back.
The other, I mean, look,
stable direction that delivers the change our country needs over a period of time, starting with the first steps, delivering the profound change that people need.
Tell me this isn't a conversation in the Labour Party right now amongst your colleagues. There must be people who are appalled that you're going into this election without any offering to families and children in poverty.
We have lots of offerings for children living in poverty. Firstly, making sure their parents' work pays, because most parents who are in work cannot put enough quality food on the table to last an entire week. Look at what life is like for ordinary working people these days. We will tackle that particular issue very rapidly. The issue of schools and kids going to school hungry, which is a massive issue. We will tackle that right from the very, very start. We'll make sure we get new teachers into schools. We'll make sure we'll create 40,000 extra appointments in the NHS every single week, so that we can get the crisis in the NHS tackled from the start. And on the back of those starting first steps, we will start to get the fundamentals of the way we run our economy changed. Because, look, on the last Labour government, 13 years, we had a lower tax burden, higher growth, and we were able to invest more in our public services. Why are we not looking at that period as the fundamentals for running a country and not be constrained by the failure, chaos and instability of the last 14?
I understand all of that. But look, I'm going to quote another kind of one of the great Labour figures of history, which is Nye Bevan, which says that socialism is the language of priorities. You seem to be suggesting that child poverty is a priority, but it's not one that we can make policies for immediately, whereas I think an awful lot of people in Britain would say, you know what, if you're not going to lift the cap on child benefit, it's not that much of a priority for you.
No, what I'm saying is, and what I've been trying to say is that we will tackle issues like child poverty, worklessness, those people prevented from working because they've not been able to be economically active after COVID because they don't have the support, because the NHS is so broken. 8.5 million people are on waiting for treatment. They're not going to be economically active. What I'm telling you is we will solve issues such as child poverty and worklessness and the other social challenges that we have by fixing the fundamentals. What you're doing is saying, give me one catchy policy with a catchy title that's going to lift children out of poverty. What I'm saying is, things are so broken and fractured in the fundamentals
It's not
of the way
catchy,
our
it's
country
just
is
a
being
practical
run,
way of solving poverty.
Well, you keep throwing one thing at me and I'm saying that's not enough. It's not enough. Because you could end up with one funding pot that tackles the children, but not tackle the parents who are coming home and they're hungry because they're not earning enough. We have to tackle the fundamental challenges facing working families right now and the issues they have, ordinary working families. And what you've heard us talk about in this manifesto is something that really would be radical for them.
Can I just ask you about another topic? Craig Williams, Tory MP, aide to Rishi Sunak, places £100 bet on the general election 3 days before the election is called, having worked very closely with the Prime Minister. Should he still be a candidate?
Look, I just don't want to engage in that. I think what you saw today was that Keir barely mentioned the Tories in his speech today, and he gave a half-hour speech where he barely mentioned them because we're leaving them behind. The country is leaving them behind. Even today, we're reminded of the reason why voters are leaving them in droves. This election is a change election. Our manifesto is an opportunity to deliver that change, and a vote for Labour is a vote for change. I don't want to even waste breath on the daily latest issues that are infecting this civil war within the Tory party and a fundamental lack of standards from number 10 through Parliament and the rest of the Conservative Party.
But he did make reference today, Peter, to Nigel Farage. He called that campaign a circus and a pantomime. This morning, the Reform leader admitted that he had aspirations to lead a centre-right party in Britain. Is that a threat to this country, or is it what the opposition needs or the Conservative Party needs?
I don't think any party needs Nigel Farage to hold them to account. I think people in Clacton should take a long, hard look at the state of our country and think, and of course their community, and think what would deliver the change that their community and their country needs. Do not start voting for people because you think that on a hypothetical that one party might need this or might need that. Vote for the party that can deliver the change our country needs. Now, if that community decides to send Nigel Farage to Parliament, of course, we'll deal with the showboating. But in none of the areas he's been elected to in the past, and I lived in an area where he was supposedly representing us as a Euro MP, he barely ever voted in Parliament. He never showed up in the areas where I was living to deliver any of the kind of changes he was promising there. He uses it as a platform for self-aggrandizement and his particular brand of personalised politics. And every party he's ever led has fallen apart. That's who he is. It's his brand of politics. That's what he offers people.
Peter Carl, great to have you on this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks.
So look, I think that a lot of Labour activists, those people who've been part of sort of child poverty action groups and all the rest of it, will feel frustrated that there isn't more in the manifesto for them. People on the left of British politics will feel frustrated by that. Keir Starmer is going for the centre ground, unapologetically. He wants that. Those are the people, and he's not going to make commitments that will lead to Tories saying, the tax bill is going to be even higher, and you can't say where you're going to pay for it. And I think that, it's kind of, I think that both parties have big questions to answer and are not being entirely candid about the challenges of public spending when they come to power, whoever wins the election.
I wonder if they do win by a solid majority, or even a landslide, whether they'll look back and say, isn't it funny, we could have actually been a lot braver in what we offered, in our promises. I mean, maybe they'll say that just proved that the strategy was right.
I think
maybe they'll say, oh yeah, we actually could have been a bit more rigorous and a bit braver in what we put in today's manifesto.
Look, we know the likes of Peter Mandelson and others who were around the New Labour project have long been saying that there ought to be more boldness, more imagination, willingness to grasp, and we just talked about it very briefly, about the issue of Brexit and what Britain's relationship should be with the European Union when public opinion seems to have changed so much. Keir Starmer has not wanted to go there. And it's like he's run a campaign where he really doesn't want that much attention. He just wants to carry on moving slowly, steadily.
No, your voice is coming on again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you doing the Starmer voice again?
Am I going to do the Starmer voice again? It really is funny the way every syllable is enunciated so clearly. There's a slight touch of the Daleks about it.
Well, that was why he was asked about the robot, wasn't it? I also thought the way Peter Carl dealt with the question about Farage was interesting. He didn't try and, talk about him as a mega threat or as a mega god. He just said, look, as a constituency MEP, he was really He never just showed up. He didn't really take constituents' interests to heart. He didn't do anything in Brussels for us. It wasn't really helpful. And I guess there was a message to Clacton in that, which is, good luck with it. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I think there is a general problem that British politics has and the media has in how you talk about Nigel Farage. On the one hand, you can't just ignore him and think that he's going to go away and that if you just say nothing about him, it will all be fine. People tried that with Donald Trump in 2016.
I don't think anyone's ignoring him.
No one's.
I don't think anyone's ignoring him.
No one is ignoring him. No one's ignoring Nigel Farage. But equally, how much attention do you pay him to everything that happens? And every time I see someone throw something at Farage, I think, you bloody idiot, because all you're doing is giving Farage exactly the sort of attention that he wants and thrives on. I thought Peter Kyle was rather effective in the way he dealt with it.
But I noticed one thing, which is that during the course of this campaign, and certainly Beth Rigby showed us this yesterday, Labour is now getting the grilling as if they were the party in power. And it's almost like subtly, I mean, certainly helped along by the Conservatives, Grant Shapps talking about a supermajority, Jeremy Hunt again today talking about a Labour victory, but can we, not make it that big? It's almost like in our own heads, they've already swapped over. That we are thinking of the Conservatives now as the party in opposition, sort of scrabbling around for their next leader. And we are treating Labour like the party of government who needs to have some bloody good answers to help mend the country.
Yeah, with power goes accountability. Yeah. And if you are an opposition, you issue press releases saying what you would do. If you're a government, you do. And you're firing with live ammunition. And you can see that mental shift taking place among the politicians, among the media, among the public. There is an expectation now that Labour will form the next government, and the people who will be in that government are being treated accordingly, and quite right.
We've got a Q&A special coming up for you tomorrow. Yes, nice sound effects.
Nice. Did you like that? Shall I do it one more time?
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got your voice notes and your questions, little pesky questions that I find quite difficult, and we'll be answering those on the show tomorrow. Thank you all for contacting us, and see you then.
Bye-bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.